religion and fertility are related. In other words, people who are very religious tend to have more babies than people who are not religious. And this makes sense because most religions promote fertility. For example, the Catholic Church not only forbids abortion, they forbid premarital sex and forbid all forms of birth control, apart from the rhythm method, which is where you have sex at only certain times of the month. So it would be reasonable to conclude that the world is going to be taken over by religion, because if religious people are reproducing and the non-religious people are not, and people's children tend to reflect the religion of their parents, it's reasonable to assume that in a future world, it's all going to be religious. Everyone's going to be religious, and countries will turn into theocracies like Iran, where one religion dominates politics. And this is frightening to someone who's non-religious like me, because theocracies have a pretty poor track record of things like human rights, and they tend to run over, the dominant religion tends to overrun all the other religions. So a future world theocracy is a pretty frightening thing. Fortunately, I don't think it's happening. I don't think this theory really holds water that God is taking over the world. And the statistics kind of bear me out. Now, the statistics do show that religious people have more children than non-religious, but it's not a lot more. The fertility of every religion is falling along with the secular world. So Muslims on a whole used to have 6 children. Now they're having on average 3 children. And Catholics used to have 6 or 7 children, and again, their fertility is coming down. The current fertility rate for Catholics in the United States, church-going Catholics, is about 2.3 children per woman, which is above the fertility rate, but it's not great. You know what, this implies to me that a lot of good Catholics are defying the church and using birth control anyway, because how else could you explain a fertility rate that's so low? We can also see this on the country level. For example, Iran, there's no theocracy more totalitarian than Iran, and their fertility is down to about 1.5, 1.6. Let's look at Ireland. Ireland is predominantly Catholic, 80% Catholic as I understand it, and until recently they had completely banned abortion. But look at their fertility rate. They're so Catholic, but their fertility rate is 1.6. They're not reproducing themselves. It's one of the best in Europe, but even this heavily Catholic nation isn't obeying the scriptures and is falling apart. There are only 2 countries in Europe that are really doing better than Ireland, and those are France and Sweden. And France is semi-Catholic, and Sweden is secular. It's Protestant. They have no objection to birth control or abortion. Yet their fertility rate is higher than Ireland's. So that kind of disproves the notion that religious people are taking over the world, because religious people have the same fertility problems as the secular people do. So how do we explain this? And my theory goes that, you know, you get married in the church or your mosque or your synagogue, and at the time you get married, you're all full of religious fervor, and you think you're going to have 6 kids. To glorify God, you're going to have 6 kids. Well, the trouble is you have to have these kids sequentially. But then you have your first kid, and the first kid is a lot of fun, but you also realize that this first kid is a lot of work. So your religious fervor to have a lot of kids already begins to drop after the first kid, because you realize what an enormous drain it is. You have your second kid, and you kind of give up on the whole 6 kids thing, because you realize 2 kids are enough to handle. So what it comes down to is religion cannot overrule economics. And the economics of child making is truly horrible. So people's religion's fervor tends to go away when it's costing them a lot of money, when it's costing them big hunks of their lives. We also have the fact that the world as a whole is getting less religious. And this is often attributed to the fact that the world is becoming more urban. More people are moving from the country to the city. When you're living in the isolation of the country, it's a lot easier to maintain your faith, become an extremist in your faith. Whereas when you get to the city, you're bombarded with all these other ideas, and this tends to moderate your religious beliefs. So people tend to be more atheistic or agnostic as they get into the city and out of the countryside. And this is a continuous flow. People are flowing out of the country and into the city, and as they flow into the city, they're becoming less religious. So there are many factors to be concerned about. I'm concerned about the fact that educated women have fewer babies than uneducated women. But I'm not particularly worried about religion taking over the world. In fact, I look at religion as sort of a savior for people like me who are not religious. Because when it comes right down to it, the process of making babies is an act of faith. It's an act of religion. Even if you don't believe in a God, it's sort of an act of religion to make a child, because it's an expensive undertaking that benefits future generations. But if you want to believe in future generations, you have to have kind of this faith that humanity is worth preserving. So I look at the big religious umbrella that countries like the United States and Europe give to religious beliefs. In the United States, it's in the Constitution that religion and state are separated, and that people have the freedom to worship whatever God they choose. And if your God is kind of this strange one where you're just worshiping fertility, you should be left alone. I've talked in previous videos about forming a community where like-minded people form a close community where they raise children together in very large households. Okay, that's kind of strange, and that's kind of weird for the general population. So you need this kind of quasi-religious protection, which says that the government is going to stay out of your life. If you want to have this communal system, you want the government to stay out of it, the United States government to stay out of it. And the U.S. Constitution gives you a little bit of protection there. If you just kind of call yourself a religion or talk about this in faith terms, then the government's got to leave you alone. So I see the great danger, one of the great dangers of developing these communities is that the rest of the larger community isn't going to like it, is going to regard this as witchcraft, and is going to try to suppress you. So you need to huddle under this umbrella of individual protections of your belief system, which is sort of quasi-religious. The point I'm making is that the nuclear family, regardless of the religion, is still in trouble. It's still not producing enough babies, and the simple reason is that babies are expensive and they don't give you any economic benefit like children may have done in the past. So ultimately economics wins. The fact that these little things are so expensive dampens people's desire to have them. You have one or two and that's it. And unfortunately those one or two are not going to make up for all those many people who don't have any at all. So I really remember the Catholics. When I was growing up, the big families in my neighborhood were Catholic families with 6 and 7 kids each. And they were kind of troubled kids. They didn't get a lot of attention. And they strictly believed in this edict from the Pope that you do not use birth control. So the kids just kept popping out. And it's remarkable to me that even the Catholics, the position of the church hasn't changed. The Pope has reaffirmed this again and again, that you cannot use birth control. But still, people make decisions. People make their own individual decisions, and religion is not that powerful. Catholic families, they're falling in size just like all the other families. So where am I? This is the City Methodist Church in Gary, Indiana. If you want to see population loss, the effects of population loss, I urge you to come to Gary, Indiana, which is just east of Chicago. This is America's ghost town. Gary, Indiana, and the cities around Gary are ghost towns where they only have a tiny fraction of the population they once had, and all of these buildings are abandoned. Like 80% of Gary, Indiana is abandoned. Not just this place, but there's a post office, there's a high school, all of Main Street is abandoned. You have, one or two fast food joints that are still, even the Popeyes fried chicken has closed, a newly opened fast food joint. It's just really sad. It's sad to see all this falling apart. But Gary, Indiana doesn't even have the money to demolish a place like this. There's just too many things to demolish. So why don't I give you a tour of this church, this almost a cathedral, isn't it beautiful? So I'm going to go get my camera and we'll take a little tour here of the City Methodist Church. We're all done with the demography stuff. I'm just going to give you a tour of this facility. The theater. Again, this was in much better condition the first time I visited. Kind of scary to have the stairs collapse. Used to be the access for the choir chamber here. At the back of the church. That is scary. I could walk on that wood to get a view of the church itself, but I ain't going to do it. This used to be an indoor gymnasium and basketball court, but the roof has fallen in. Keep going up. I'm not scared of abandoned places, but I'm scared of heights. I don't like to fall. Looking down on the gymnasium. There's another whole wing out there. Walls just fall down, they fall down on their own. Or vandals, I don't know. I don't even want to go down those stairs. See the facing on the bricks, that deteriorates on its own. That's the stairs I came down, but let's go down here a little into the dark dungeon area. Oh, here we are. We're on the we're in the balcony of the theater. Side is a fire escape and downtown Gary, Indiana. It's raining. Well, someone's kind enough to leave a trash can here. New housing here, that's remarkable. It's the only new housing I've seen in Gary is right here. Probably government built. And that hotel has become a housing authority. And here's your outside. Okay, can't walk all the way around. Time to wrap it up. This is the City Methodist Church in Gary, Indiana. I'm getting all rained on. Time to edit these videos and move on.